In this episode, the final key running foundation, channeling our energy with discussion about nutrition, rest, relationships, and more, and unparalleled record-breaking performances on the track over the weekend. You don't want to miss even a second.
Information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and ideas for making connections and finding community. You're listening to AtoZrunning.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Zach.
And I'm Andy.
And before we get into anything specific, we do want to talk briefly about a new product we've experienced, these compression socks.
Yeah, SB Socks reached out to us and sent us some compression socks to try out. And they also gave us a code, and that's AtoZrunning, and you get 10% off of 3 pairs of socks. And these are the most affordable compression socks I've seen on the market. They're like $15 for 3 pairs.
That's really something. Most of the time, to buy a single pair of tall compression socks, you're looking at like $50 for, the leading companies.
Yeah, and these are the lighter ones, so I would recommend wearing these for like travel. Maybe if you work sitting down, or you just kind of need that like extra edge for recovery, these would be really great for you. And the sale goes on until July 31st at midnight. So if you want to hop on to AtoZrunning.com/episode 41, you can find the link to those socks there. And if you're a subscriber, you can get that discount code.
And it's probably worth mentioning, the reason we're not sitting here talking about how great compression is and all of this kind of stuff is because there's really not a good body of work that proves compression is a significant factor in benefiting your running, like talking about performance or talking about speed and recovery and such. As far as anyone knows for sure, compression is absolutely beneficial in a sedentary period when you need to improve circulation when you're just sitting for long periods of time. So
or after racing, hard workouts.
Well, sure, yeah, especially when you're sedentary. So if you're moving about and you're active, that is helping improve your circulation. So there's not conclusive evidence that compression adds more to that. But if you're sitting in an office chair all day working, or if you do a hard workout in the morning and then you go to work for 8 hours or something, definitely wear your compression. Or if you got to drive in the car for 4 hours to go somewhere, if you're flying in a plane, wear these socks. And since that's the case, all of the things I just listed, I don't want to spend $50 for a pair of socks to sit in the office all day, but I would spend $15 for 3 pair. And these are the kinds of socks that I would wear for that purpose.
Yeah, and I think all of us as runners, we want to find just little ways to recover better, to feel better. And I do think that I've felt better personally using compression, especially because I was marathon training with a job where I was traveling and also standing in heels. So I wore sleeves. And I do think that it helped me quite a bit in my recovery during that time.
So speaking of Andy and running, Andy is, in fact, actually doing a little bit of running.
Hallelujah.
Lately.
Yes.
So if you've been following with us, Andy's been hurt, but hurt in an unspecified way. Something wrong with the foot, but no conclusive
I just
proof.
took it very cautiously because I really don't want to set myself back further. And I had some tremendous pain in my foot. And then for the past 2 weeks, it's been feeling better. So now I'm up to about 5 or 6 weeks. And I just decided that I was going to give it a go. So I've been doing the run walk method.
Gala walking,
as we've told all of you is a good idea coming back from injury, pregnancy, or starting out as a new runner.
Definitely. So the key takeaway here is there is no urgency. There's no thing to get back to immediately right now because there's no thing on the horizon. Unfortunately, these, the cancellations and such, they're still happening. And so if you're like Andy in that situation, or even like I was with my shin problem a little while back, I took 5 days off, not really needed. I could have probably run through that pain and continued on in my training, but why? Why risk that?
Risk versus benefit. We always are weighing this. And when I was in marathon training, I had some niggles and I trained through them. I didn't do as high of mileage, but I wanted to run in the Olympic trials, so I needed to be ready to do that.
Were those niggles your husband and 2 sons? Is that what you're talking about? Or is it a different kind of niggle?
Those are wiggly niggles.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay,
all right,
that was
so
a
you
dumb
definitely
joke.
don't want to hear us talking anymore about ourselves after that. So we've got a phenomenal episode planned today, and it's long anticipated conclusion to our Running Foundations series. So we've done 3 parts now. This has been the 3rd. And what we're trying to do here is we're really trying to lay out what does it take to be a thriving runner. These are the running foundations, the 3 keys to thrive as a runner. So what does it take? The first one was aerobic condition. That was episode 39. Go back and listen to that if you haven't yet, because that is basically our argument for the most important way you should train as a distance runner. And everyone needs to be doing a significant amount of it. Not to say that everyone should be doing that all the time and only that. That's not the argument we make, but go listen to the episode. You'll hear it. Number 2 then was strength and mobility, which was episode 40. And that's like, do you want to feel good while you're running? And of course, the answer is yes.
Do you want to stay healthy while you're
stay
running?
Healthy while you're running? Do you want life to, when you go unload some wood chips and throw them in a wheelbarrow and shovel them somewhere and then feel sore for a week? That's a problem. Do you want to avoid some of that kind of stuff? So you need to be working on strength and mobility just like everyone else does. And so we laid out some really practical approaches to that. And then in this final installment, we're going to be talking about general health and wellness and what it takes to maintain. So it's basically 2 things. General health and wellness is the catch-all, essentially, for everything non-training. It is that. But in more important terms, it's the lens through which we view all of the things we're doing in terms of our running identity, our running world, our running life and such. And so we want to really dig into the body, mind, spirit of a thriving runner. And that will be coming up after a little bit from the world of running.
Exciting things from the world of running.
So first thing first, which is so disappointing for everyone, including the race directors, Rivertown Races is canceled. That's a local West Michigan race in Grand Rapids, Millennium Park, and it was planned for August 1st. So if you were planning to do this, and I think we talked about it most recently on the last episode, because it was still on as of the last episode. Sorry to all of you, and we're feeling the sorrow with you because we were going to be there, and it was really going to be the first chance to get out and compete in some fashion. Not happening. And so now we look to the next first chance and we just hope for another.
And until then, we're living vicariously through, and as big fans of these amazing runners of Bowerman Track Club who ran 5Ks, freaky fast 5Ks, North American record 5Ks.
Oh, don't give it away yet.
Oh.
Okay, so this is incredible. Bowerman Track Club it's the premier track club now as far as, well, in the U.S. There are these affiliate track programs that it's who is actually part of these running teams? You never really know. They're the secret teams. This is what Kipchoge is part of, right? Do you actually know who's on Eliud Kipchoge's team, who he runs with? And the answer is no, you don't. And I always wonder why, because they don't publicize that kind of stuff. But Bowerman Track Club's it, man. They lead the world, it would seem, right now in track. And they showed up again.
It was incredible. We watched, and we'll link to the USATF
you've
TV.
got to watch this.
Yeah. It is incredible to see people run this fast for this long.
Yeah, listen, if you've never seen women run under 14:30 in a 5K before and you want to know what that looks like, watch this race.
Well, Shelby Houlihan ran 14:34.
No, that was her previous record, Andy. Oh. Shelby Houlihan ran 14:23 for right. A new American record.
Oh my
goodness. The second fastest time ever run on American soil and the 12th fastest performance by a human being who's female in the 5K. Are you kidding me?
Are you kidding me?
So, by the way, if you look on the list of the top 11 in front of her, so it's Ethiopia everywhere. There's 3 Kenyans, and then there's from the Netherlands, which is Sifan Hassan. And so she's not Netherlands born. Well, she might be born in the Netherlands now that I think about it. But genetically, she's East African as well, which only means something insofar as the fact that East Africans dominate this list. And then there's a Russian right in front of Shelby Houlihan, and it's Shelby Houlihan. So there's not very many non-East African descent runners who can do this, period, who even are capable. But not only did Shelby Houlihan run 14:23, but her teammate, Carissa Schweizer, ran 14:26.
Okay, and the most impressive thing about this, in my opinion, is the fact that her previous personal best was 14:45.
Listen.
That's a huge
19
PR. At that
second
level?
PR. Already world class.
Yeah. It's
Already.
already ridiculously fast. So to like push the extra envelope to go that much faster is just out of this world.
So Shelby Houlihan held the American record prior to this race, and 14:34, as Andy was saying earlier, from last year. So Shelby Houlihan just ran an 11-second personal best in only a year's time. Carissa Schweitzer just ran a 19-second personal best to also best the previous American record. So both of them went under it. They're teammates, they're training partners. Like, this stuff just doesn't happen.
I know.
Wow.
And they did talk after in their post-race interview with USA TF TV. They were talking about how the fact that they are training partners has really benefited them and that they're really good at being like teammates and helping each other, but then they get really competitive, and you saw that in this race.
Yeah, and by the way, that time is like 4:36 mile pace.
Oh my goodness.
So let that sink in a second. Maybe it's like
4:36.
4:39, but so they were running like 69/72 per lap, which is 4:36 to 4:40 mile pace. And then Shelby Houlihan dropped like a 61-second final lap, 400 meters, which is 4:04 mile pace. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are not just runners. This is something. Well, it didn't end there.
It did not.
The
end.
night was
not even
over.
close. Not even close to ending. It was ramping up.
So the men's race was to follow. And this is just their own club running an entire meet. So there was like 7 women in the race, and they were all teammates. There's 8 men in the race, or 9 men in the race. They're all teammates. And, 4 of them, I think, finished each of the runs. So they just did these 2 5Ks. That was the whole meet, if you will. In the men's race, you had the pace set at 12:55.
Yeehaw.
That's what they were intending to run, that pace. So just process this with me. 12:55, it's about 4:09 mile pace. I've run 4:10 as my fastest mile, so I do know what that feels like, and I would never be able to do that for more than a couple laps at this point now. It's insane. So as these guys are running, and the announcers are talking about, like, yeah, they just ran another 61-second lap, another 62-second lap, and they just look like they're jogging out there. It's crazy. Well, so you got basically a bunch of Americans, and Mohamed, who's actually Canadian, but he's still part of the Bowerman Track Club. They're all the same team. So Mohamed holds, previous to this race, the Canadian national record in about 12:58. That was his personal best. And then you had one other athlete in the run who has run under 13 previously, Woody Kincaid, and he was like a 12:58 is his best time from, I think it was last year. It might have been earlier this spring. I cannot remember, unfortunately. But aside from that, basically, there's only been 9 Americans who had run. Nine Americans who had run under 13 minutes, period, in the history of time. And so we just gotta tell you, Mohamed ran 3:58 for his last 1,600, his last 4 laps. He basically ran a sub 4 mile to close out this race to finish in the 10th fastest time in the world ever in 12:47.
It just, yes.
Whoa!
And the way that his stride looked.
So good.
He was so smooth. He was so efficient. He used every part of that stride as he was propelling himself forward. And at the end, he even did the little like sprinter duck head thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, man.
He did that at the very end of the race. It was amazing. And even though the cameras were on him, Lopez Lamont was still running ridiculously fast. So it was like hard to see them both on the same screen. But he was the 9th. He's the 9th now.
9th American
to join
run
the sub
under
13 minute club.
Yeah.
He ran 12:58.78. He's American.
He is
by the way.
American. So Lopez Lamont is 35 years old and has run 13 flat like 2 or 3 times, or close to that, like 2 or 3 times. And he's been so close. And, it's one of those things where it's like his career looked like it was fizzling out about 4 or 5 years ago. He was a 1,500 specialist, a miler, and he had a great run, and then he just kind of was struggling for a bit. And then the 5K happened. And suddenly it's like, oh, Lopez Lomong's a world-class 5K runner. Who would have guessed? So, and he just dropped a 12:58. The crazy part is, not even kidding, Mohamed running in front of him and running away from him like that made Lopez Lomong look just, as you're watching the cast, looks almost pedestrian. But then you find out he just ran 12:58.
And he didn't look that way until the last few laps.
It was the last two laps when
Mohamed.
when Mohamed really took off. But
that was really impressive. And of course, as being a 31-year-old, I see that 35 and I'm like, hey, he's doing it. He's making things happen. We're going to have Kira D'Amato on the podcast in a couple of weeks. She's 35, just ran a smoking
15:04
for a 5K.
Solo time trial. Yeah.
So anyway, I love hearing these 30-plus-year-olds getting it done.
Yeah, because it's the only way we have any hope for ourselves. All right,
That's
so
not true.
This is so exciting to us because it's happening, for one thing, but really just, these are the kinds of things that make the sport so exciting, is when you just see, not because they're running fast, it doesn't have to be national caliber record times to be an exciting thing, but they're just these teammates going out and just crushing it. And you can see the excitement and the energy, and there's only like 17 people in the entire stadium, and yet you can still see the excitement and the energy. It's great.
And we were very grateful that it was broadcast. So thank you to USATF TV for doing that.
USATF.tv for all of the times I complain about how they don't cover the things I want them to cover. They did cover this, so
they heard you, Zach.
It's good. Maybe
they all listened to the podcast last week and were like, "Hey, we got to show this guy some track and field."
All right. Well, we should just wrap up the track and field news. It's not track and field news. We should wrap up the world of running at the moment, but there's other things to talk about, and we'll circle back to some of that stuff next time. So let's jump over to our main topic after a short break. All right, as promised, the final and third installment in the Running Foundation. So that's why it's 3 keys to thriving, and specifically thriving as a runner. So general health and wellness, and we're really actually calling this channeling the energy.
And Zach resisted that, but it really makes the most amount of sense for this topic, because really that is what we're doing. In this life, we have a certain amount of energy in a day, and how we channel that energy and how we use it in running to be productive in other areas of our life is essential to thriving and continuing running as a lifelong sport.
Yeah, so the fundamental thing that we want to state here, and we could probably just say this sentence and then wrap up the episode. So for your general health and wellness, to channel the amount of energy appropriately in terms of running, it must follow this one simple rule. Your running must be a positive contribution to the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. That is the fundamental rule. And if it's not, you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
It's going to somehow be a negative influence on itself and the things that you're influencing the rest of your life, whatever that is. So certainly for most of us, running is little more than an important hobby. I mean, as Andy and I are sitting here talking, we love running. We do a lot of things, like even the A to Z running stuff around the sport of running, but it really is an important hobby in most senses. And so, and it's a passion, and it's a significant part of what we love to do. But that being said, if that's true for you as well, it should only ever occupy the amount of space in life that an important hobby occupies, or take up the amount of energy that an important, and so that's a difficult way to filter how we're thinking about these things, because it also, to do this well, if I want to be the best runner I can be, I really have to be thinking about a lot of different factors, and that's where we're going to go with some of this stuff. But all of that to say, before we get into these details, it's just important to remember that it has to maintain its appropriate amount of space. So that's different, obviously, for everyone. That's different in every context.
Right.
If you're a single person and you're living kind of by yourself, working a relatively non-stressful job, you probably have more space and energy that running could occupy. If you're married and you and your spouse have 17 kids running around everywhere, and you work a really intense job, or you own your own business, you've got less energy to devote to running, and so you shouldn't be devoting as much energy to it as someone who has more. And then the context obviously even change. If you got 3 birthday parties this week and a major deadline with work or something else going on that occupies a lot of time and space, you've got less energy this week to devote to it. But if another week you're kind of, on a restful vacation type of period of time, or most of your family is away at camps or school or, those kinds of things, suddenly you have more time in it. So you get the point.
So I do recognize that our audience is going to be full of people who really like to have everything down to a T.
Like me.
Perfectionist, perhaps. I'm not labeling you. Don't feel labeled.
She is labeling me. She looked at me when she said that. So
that might be true. But it is so important to hold loosely some things and have flexibility. So I'm just saying that because I think a lot of our ability to channel energy is going to be with the flow.
With the flow?
Yes, channeling the flow.
Channeling the flow. So it's not channeling energy anymore.
No,
so we change it to channel
the
flow
of energy.
Actually, I think flow is like a trademarked term now after that author wrote his book called Flow.
Oh.
Well, so Andy, you've got a couple examples of some things before we try to get into then our specific recommendations.
Right, because I think a lot of this balance comes in creatively thinking about our running and maybe adapting the way that we think about things and use running. So I wrote a post. It's called Running in the Raw, the truth about my running. So I did a raw running evaluation, and I will put that in the podcast blog post for you to read if you would like.
AtoZrunning.com/episode 41.
But I do want to mention like a couple things that I've learned personally, and I think authenticity is a great way for all of us to grow and learn from each other. So I've used running in the past to mask insecurity. It became my identity, who I am. But running, on the flip side, can be used to center yourself. So like on a run, you can learn more about yourself. You can dive into things you need to work on. So instead of masking insecurity, it can help you become more centered. Now, I've used running to escape obligations, using it as an excuse to get out of social interaction or to avoid uncomfortable situations. But instead of escaping obligations, on the flip side, we can use running to structure our priorities and help us see what is important. So,
and it's probably an important reflection here as we're thinking about why, Andy? Why is it a bad thing to escape obligations with the run? And, I remember when I was a teenager, one time I went out for a run because there was shouting happening in my house and I didn't want to be a part of it. So I just put on my shoes and went running. The reality is that if we're trying to use something like this to avoid or self-medicate or, all those kinds of things, and we're not addressing some kind of problem or tension or conflict, it's not going to get better just because I went for that run. Now, it can potentially put me in a better headspace to address it later. So I'm not saying that that's entirely bad. But I guess the whole point is here, we're really trying to wrestle with the concept of how to find harmony, body, mind, spirit, harmony, and how running is or is not a part of that.
Mm-hmm. And if we are ones to find ourselves in isolation, we talk about it all the time in this podcast, but running might be a way to connect with some people and to build relationships by having friends who are also runners. And I found personally that side-by-side time is really important for me. So whether I'm running or I'm doing some other activity, relationally, I do better side by side. So running has kind of filled that for me in a good way, and I've used running instead of to avoid relationships to build relationships.
So let's try to break it down here in terms of what do we mean by the general health and wellness stuff, what's involved in that, which I mentioned just a moment ago, and what are the best kinds of recommendations that we can offer as far as what is objectively true. And the first thing here, so we're talking about body, mind, and spirit as the kind of areas of focus for general health and wellness. And as you might guess, that we're really just trying to include everything that might be a part of your life in some way. So obviously with your body, we're really focusing on nutrition, hydration, sleep, rest, all of those kinds of things. And I think it's not a bad idea for just about all of us to try to, at some point or another, take a look at Matt Fitzgerald's book, Endurance Diet. It's the Endurance Diet, and it's like 5 habits or something like that that professional runner. So basically, here's what Matt Fitzgerald did. He attempted to go all over the world and spend some time with the best endurance athletes from like nearly every culture. And I don't think he made it across every culture in the world, or every major culture, if you will. But he encountered just about everything out there. You know, the cross-country skiers in the Scandinavian states and France and in the mountains there. And he was with the East Africans, and he was down in South America. And he was all over the place. And he drew some really interesting conclusions. And I think the most important takeaway, when you look at all the research about nutrition, about diet, and by the way, when I say all the research, let's remember some of it, you know, from like 3 years ago, which has been refuted. And, you know, this happens about every week. Some kind of new study claims the opposite of the most recent new study, and that happens constantly. And so then there's new diet, and this is the best diet, and this is the right diet, and all of that kind of stuff. The point is, there is no actual nutrition solution that all of us should seek. There isn't.
Well, except for the generalizations. And I have to say that we have worked with some nutritionists in our blog posts that talks about some great foods to integrate into your diet. There is science. There is good stuff out there.
Yeah,
but not
like
everyone's going to have the same needs.
Food that's more quality than food that's less quality. Like it is a good idea to avoid eating tons of highly processed food only all the time. But that doesn't mean you should cut 100% all processed food out of your diet. You don't need to necessarily.
Well, some people might.
You might. Exactly. That's the whole point. It's contextual. And what the right diet is for you is almost definitely not the right diet for every other of the people listening to this episode right now. So that's kind of the conclusion that Matt Fitzgerald drew as he was traveling all over the place. And, you know, some of it's cultural, some of it's hereditary, some of it's contextual. You know, all of those kinds of things are piece of the puzzle. So what is it we're going to say about diet and nutrition? We're going to say, try to eat well and
seek help if you would like.
Yeah, if you're feeling something badly, something's not working right for you, then make a change.
Right.
But
or seek help with a professional.
Always a good idea to yes. But here's the point that I think is always important to remember. If you're going to change anything with your diet, change as few things as possible at once. Because if you change a bunch of things, you never know which one actually worked or didn't work. And, you know, so change as few things as possible at once. And if you're going to change anything in your diet, avoid changing it in an extreme way. So change things gradually in small ways in isolation, because that's how you're going to start to really hone in on what's working best for you.
Yeah. And I know a lot of runners have had the opportunity to do some nutritional testing and some allergy testing. And if that's available to you and that's in your price zone, I think you should go for it. Like, I'd love to do that. I haven't yet in my life, but that would be highly beneficial if there are nutritional issues that are going on in your life that are affecting your running and your health.
It's not a bad idea to remember as well, if you've had something come up at some point, these things change dramatically over time also, just naturally. So like if you've been anemic at some point, doesn't mean that you are now, and, you know, like that kind of thing. So if, you know, use whatever the most current information you have is and try to make your decisions well. And that. Of course, there's a lot of things that you can do out there, and we're just not going to try to tell you what to do with all of that, except to
pay attention.
Try to pay attention.
Pay attention to it. And we are having Abdi Abnuraman on our podcast coming up, so make sure you subscribe. And he did talk about getting proper rest, and that's been important for him. So he'll talk more about that next week on the podcast.
Yeah, so we obviously, in terms of your body, but also, you know, your mind and anything, rest matters. And rest is a couple of different kinds of things, but specifically physical rest, like physical sleep. There's always some interesting reflections on, like, you know, if you're running more, if you run this amount, then you need this amount of sleep. Like, don't trust any of that kind of stuff, because it's only ever based off a limited amount of information. And probably not you, because unless you were part of that study that drew that conclusion. So the reality here is, if you're running a lot, you probably need more sleep than if you're not running a lot. And you're only ever going to know that when it's too late. That's kind of the thing with sleep. You know, it catches up with you eventually. So,
I did watch part of Gwen Jorgensen's YouTube channel, and she was talking about having her nap time as something that was scheduled in her training plan. She had to meet the requirements of her training plan by getting naps in.
Yeah, as of yet, I've never talked with a professional runner who doesn't nap at pretty much every day, not every single day, but pretty much every day. And that's probably because they need to.
Yeah.
But we're not professional runners.
I would love to nap.
And it sounds like a nice thing, but it doesn't mean we need it. I don't know. In reality, I should just be going to bed earlier every night, and then I'll feel great. And, here's the interesting thing, and I can tell you right now, I get about 6 hours of sleep on average when I'm not really training much at all, and I feel fine.
That's not enough for me, though.
If it's a little more than that, I probably feel excellent. But if I'm really at the peak of training, at 6 hours, I'm barely awake.
It's devastating.
It's awful. So it matters. It makes a difference. And just a quick reflection on the last piece here. We've talked about hydration quite a bit at different points throughout our material. So like especially in our blog, you'll go back and read some of that stuff. But the thing with hydration is really actually quite simple. Obviously, we need to be drinking a lot of water. But think about it like this. What is the reason you need to be drinking a lot of water? And the answer is simply this. Your blood flows better when you're better hydrated. And your blood is what's getting everything where it needs to be in your body. So you think better when you're better hydrated. Your nutrition that you're trying to eat well gets to the right places better when you're better hydrated. And of course, when you're actually training, the oxygen that provides the fuel for your muscles. I'm talking about that aerobic conditioning episode. So if you didn't listen to that one, go back. That oxygen is what makes it all work. And that oxygen only gets places if you're well hydrated. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter how good a shape you are. The hydration is the thing that makes it all work. Mm-hmm. So drink more water.
Or noon or
no, but those
electrolyte
things
drink.
Those things are hydration plus some other things.
Yeah.
You need high volumes of just water.
Sure.
Every day.
I'm just saying, hydration.
Yeah.
Hydration station.
If you're sweating a lot, then you also need electrolyte. Yeah.
The next thing is our mind and spirit.
So we're kind of lumping these two together because it's really hard. Like the things you do for your mind are also the kinds of things you do for your spirit. And what do we even mean when we say spirit? We're talking about the essence of your total self, mm-hmm. I guess, is the best way to look at that. And people define this kind of stuff in so many different ways. Are you religious? Are you not religious? Are you Eastern religious or Western religious? You define it all differently, but that's not really what we're trying to get into here. We're just trying to look at your total sense of yourself, like your emotions, your relationships, your society, your identity, all of that stuff we're including in this concept, this mind-spirit element.
And we talked a little bit about this, but balance. Do we have balance in our commitments? Do we have the right, proper place for our priorities? And that includes running. Yeah.
So, there's a concept of cognitive dissonance, which I'm sure most of you know what that is, whether or not that phrase means anything to you. The sense of a thing just doesn't work right in our head. The amount of time we spend doing something, and yet we're telling ourselves it's not that important of a thing, but we're spending hours and hours doing it. That's cognitive dissonance because you spend so much time doing it. It must be important.
Yeah.
So you can't tell yourself it's not that important. And then on the flip side of this here, if you're telling yourself running is super important, but you're not spending a lot of time doing it, there's another, so the point is, the balance matters because when there's cognitive dissonance, and all the studies tell us this from all the psychologists, when there's cognitive dissonance, we struggle to thrive, and it actually has physical implications, causes increased anxiety and stress in your life. It has implications on relationships because your level of patience is probably lower.
Or you're feeling defensive.
Yeah, and that cognitive dissonance can have nothing to do with the context you're in. And yet, because it's present in your mind, it's causing problems in all of those things.
Yeah, and we have to know, why is it that we play something down, or why is it that we play something up?
Or why do we just not appropriately estimate in our minds something? Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say, I've been imperfect with this, and I think it was... who was it? They call it sandbagging your performances, saying, I didn't train that much, or I didn't do that much, or whatever. And in the fact of the matter is, I do care. And it's hard to admit that I care. I care about this sport of running. And there's part of us that feels a little weird about it, or that we shouldn't, or that people will expect more of us, or that they'll judge us. And I think that we need to find the rightful place for running in our lives and be able to think through why we're doing it, the benefits that it has for us, the way we're able to incorporate important things in life like community and health and our mental well-being. And that's all what we're talking about today. So being able, like Zach said, to bring harmony to all of that will help us not feel defensive or shame when it comes to our time or lack thereof spent in the sport of running.
Yeah, that's a good point. That sense of cognitive dissonance or just disharmony in general, that can be self-inflicted. So when I think two conflicting things about something, that creates that cognitive dissonance, but it actually can also be externally inflicted. So if someone else thinks something that's in conflict with what I think about a thing, that can cause cognitive dissonance for me. It also causes relational dissonance, which is a different kind of thing. But, so if you have a family member who's like, you run too much and you're not spending time with me, or, that kind of thing, that's going to cause you problems. Even if you don't agree, even if you're like, it's just not true and the person's overreacting or something like that, it doesn't matter. It's still going to cause you problems because they think it. So you got to address these things. And what does that mean to address them? I don't know. What, your situation.
We are not relationship coaches.
We are not. We're not counselors. We're not trained in this kind of stuff. We just know it's there and it needs to be dealt with, or because we want you to be a thriving runner. Why are we telling you this? Because we want you to be a thriving runner. And there's more than what we know to talk about that's at play with all of these things. But we're going to talk about what we do know, at least from our experiences and what we've seen out there. And these things are all a part of it. One of the key factors that we think can help with a lot of this is how we use our running time. So whatever the things are that are out of balance, that creates some kind of gap. Like there's just something that I'm missing in my life that I need more of in some way. And if it's possible for the time you spend running to fill that gap, I highly encourage you to use it thus. So I'm going to give you a series of very simple examples because I think this is true for a lot of us. If you feel like you just need more quiet, like you don't have a lot of space where you can think and reflect and where you can meditate or pray, if you don't have the time and space to do those things, if you're running an hour every day, oh my goodness, do it during that run. Like you need that time and space. And so it can be the quiet space. And for most of us, I would say probably for most of us, it does, whether it's not at every single run, it does tend to function that way because by nature, the fact that you can go out at 6 a.m. on a January morning when it's pitch dark and everything's silent because of the snow and ice and such, it's inevitable that you're going to get a degree of quiet whether you wanted it or not. All right, so if you need more social interaction, find people to run with. Yeah. Especially if they're people that are already relationships you're trying to cultivate in some way. So that's, for a lot of us, we have friends and family members who will also, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're running toward the same aspirations or goals as us, and they don't have to run the same amount of time as you. If you run for 20 minutes with the friend and then you go another 40 minutes, like that's okay. But what it's doing is it's helping fill that void of cultivating relationships you might not have had the time and opportunity to do so. And there's something really potent about, the accountability that comes with like, hey, we're going to meet at this time and we're going to run together. It makes the entire running experience better in a lot of ways too.
I've been so spoiled with
you have
fabulous running friends.
You've got so many great people to run with, family members, friends, and like everyone you know. Everyone you know.
I'm very persistent as well. So, I have some really great friendships that have come from the sport of running, and I miss a lot of them now, but I did get the opportunity, and we actually discussed it with Joanna Stevens. We did some aqua jogging today, but we kind of were talking about how a lot of our friendships are through the sport of running. So like when you don't run together, you don't see each other for very long. It's like, oh, we can do other things besides run. Oh, let's aqua jog. Well, of course we chose side by side time, something working out. But if you're like me and you are injured, maybe still get together with that running friend or call him on the phone because I know it's COVID and we're keeping our circles small. But all that to say, running relationships can be very influential and important in keeping our social health. Yeah, and on the opposite extreme of that, for me, almost since the day I graduated college, I've generally preferred to run alone. So I've done now over a decade of training
mostly alone, and have never felt badly about that in terms of like, oh man, this is hard to go out and do this again by myself. And I honestly think that a large part of the reason is because I work as my profession. I work in an entirely social experience until the COVID recently that changed that. But I was a teacher for 5 years and then an instructional coach working with teachers for the next 4.5, 5 years after that. And so, all day, every day, I'm interacting with people. And if you haven't guessed from listening to our podcast, I'm quite introverted by nature. And I really need some time away from people when I'm spending all day working with people. So the fact that I run alone has been a very valuable part in just keeping me centered with all of this social interaction I have for work. So
but I have to say that Zach has kind of started thinking more along the lines of meeting up with friends to run and kind of opening up his idea of training partners and thinking about running with others, just because that is an element that can help sharpen us and make us better in addition to the health social side.
So I do also want to mention here another kind of, what other gaps do you potentially have that running time can fill? And there's a lot of answers to that. But, a lot of people like to listen to things while they run.
Like this podcast.
So,
so thank you for listening.
If you don't
good job. Keep going. You're doing great.
In your regular day schedule, if you don't have time and opportunity to listen to interesting content, so learning is a really important part as we age. Learning new things is one of the factors that helps us age well mentally. We've seen the studies. You all know that. Well, so if you're 60 plus, someone's probably yelling at you about this because this is like, you're getting older. You need to be learning new things. And everyone's like, I'm 60. I don't want to learn anything new. I'm only saying that because our parents are right around that age and they've been talking about this. But
sharpening the brain.
Sharpening your brain. I mean, really though, if you need some interesting ideas, new interesting ideas, like listening to podcasts while you run, listening to audiobooks, that kind of stuff, that's another element that might be a valuable use of that time. And many of you already do that, so you already know that.
You're already listening to this podcast while you're running.
And on the flip of all of this, if the thing you need more of at the moment is, running itself is putting a strain on your more pressing needs, whatever those may be, then maybe it's a good day or week or month to take a break and have some rest.
And it is recommended to get an hour, half an hour of exercise each day. So find something else. Like
2 hours of exercise each day.
Zach's 2 hours.
You heard it here.
No, we are not medical professionals. So Zach's telling you to go 2 hours. I'm not telling you to do that. Okay. So what I was saying is that it's recommended to get exercise each day. So trying something new and having running not be the only outlet would be a very beneficial thing. Like this aqua jogging thing I've got going on, it doesn't take any of the impact. So like I think that overall it was really good for me after 2 marathon cycles to have the opportunity to train in the pool for a bit and not have that pounding. Find something that you love to do some other exercises, try to keep the momentum as we talked about with Cody Risch in our episode a few episodes back. I'll link to that as well. But momentum can often mean changing it up because what you really need is that recharge time before your next launch.
So there's obviously so much more to this concept. That's why, billions of pages have been published on the ideas that we're trying to talk about in just 20 minutes here. But the reality is to be a thriving runner, we have to first look at the amount of time and energy we're putting into running through the lens of as it is, whether that's like an important hobby or if you're a professional runner, that's your job, then obviously it matters more. Whatever the thing is that it is it occupying an appropriate amount of my energy and time and space? Is it influencing my relationships in an appropriate way? Is it influencing my health in an appropriate way? And then I also look at those other things and say, are my relationships positively contributing to running? Is there balance there? Is there a balance between what I'm choosing to eat right now and the run I have to do tomorrow? Like all of those things. It's the lens that I use to try to look at these things in a way so that I can thrive.
And one thing that Zach just said, it reminded me, I wanted to mention in the body piece of it, is that Zach had said if running is benefiting my health. And I, for one, have been running addicted in the past, which means that I'm running to the detriment of my body. And I can probably say it pretty confidently that someone listening today is running to the detriment of their body. And I just want to say, first of all, you're not alone. It's happened to me too. But also that running doesn't define who you are, and it is an actual physical addiction, like the endorphins that you're getting from this. And there's a lot that can be done to help switch that thinking, but you don't have to give up running entirely in order to have a more balanced view of running in your life. So whatever your goals are, take a step back and take a look at what you want for your whole life, what you want for your time on this planet, not just the running goals, and try to reprioritize and see how your mind, body, and spirit can work in harmony.
So in summary, and by the way, if you want the complete running foundations in published form, you must be a subscriber to AtoZrunning.com to get for free for a limited time. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay for it. So if you want it free, subscribe. It's free to subscribe as well at AtoZrunning.com. Look for the follow button at the top or AtoZrunning.com/subscribe. And what you're going to get, in summary, is the running foundations, 3 keys to thriving, which are, as mentioned, aerobic conditioning. So raise the roof at all costs. No, sorry, that's not the right way to say that.
You're talking about balance here, Zach.
In all things, as a distance runner, you are benefited by having a better aerobic condition, by raising your aerobic roof, if you will. And so that is the first priority for distance runners, and it should always be the first priority. What can I do to raise my aerobic condition, and how to do that well? We broke that down in episode 39. Then in episode 40, we talked about number 2, general strength and mobility. And that is then to strengthen the animal, is the way you feel better running. It's the way you stay healthier running. It's also the thing that makes all the rest of the running stuff a better experience for you when you're strong and mobile.
Oh, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have an expert, Kayla Russo.
We've got so much content coming in the next few weeks, digging deep into these things with examples from experts. It's good stuff. So then number 3, foundation number 3 is, as we've discussed here, which is the general health and wellness side of everything, and channel the energy well so that everything in your life is influenced positively as much as can be, or at least neutrally. You know, if running has a negative influence on something in your life, it's a problem. And that problem will never go away until it's addressed. So channel the energy appropriately and well for body, mind, spirit harmony.
Thanks, Zach. That's good. I like how we broke it down. And if you like it too, make sure you subscribe so you can get it all in written form. And also, I just want to say thank you, because I recently put a little introduction, because it had been a while, on social media. And just, we've gotten a lot of great feedback and just a lot of friendships and connections that we've made. And that's what A to Z Running is all about. And if you think that maybe a running friend of yours might want to be part of this A to Z Running community, share this episode, and let us know too, so we can follow them back on social media as well. We want this to be a relationship, a community. So thank you so much. I just really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next week.